Now let's turn and talk a little bit about the common problems that people encounter and some of the issues surrounding them as it relates to credit information. One of the big factors that people talk about, we've already mentioned before, and that is late payments. You know, late payments really do hurt you in the credit equation. A lot of people who think that they have very good credit, they'll apply for that home mortgage, for example, and they'll figure out that, you know, some 5 or 8, 10 years ago, somebody made a report on a 60-day overdue payment, and before you can get your mortgage application approved, you have to provide some sort of explanation about that or try to get it removed from your credit report. These things can be rather haunting to you if you don't keep an organized approach to this. As we talked about in the capacity factors just a minute ago, carrying too much debt often becomes an issue for folks, and you need to reduce that debt burden. You discipline yourself to pay that down and not take any more on whenever possible. Now, interestingly, for military people, the considerations that creditors use to determine whether or not you are a good credit risk are very similar in some respects to the decisional factors that are used in deciding whether or not to give a person a security clearance. A lot of folks in the military have a security clearance. Many of them, most everyone will get a secret clearance. A lot of folks will get a top secret clearance. But it is considered to be a risk factor in the security clearance equation if a person carries on too much debt. It's believed that a person who can't control their finances may be subject to undue influence from foreign enemies. They are at risk in some ways for bribery, blackmail, these sorts of things. And a lot of times security clearances are denied or revoked based on a person's debt. I can tell you that as some of my background, I've spent a career as a JAG lawyer in the military, and we've certainly dealt with these kinds of issues at many levels where a person gets into one kind of trouble or another because of the debt that they have taken on. And getting your security clearance revoked can be one of them. You can literally put your career in jeopardy if you're not careful, because perhaps you have the kind of job or will have the kind of job eventually in the military where a security clearance will be required. And what good is it without that security clearance? So people put themselves at risk for administrative discharge and perhaps other actions if they don't take care to manage their finances well. There actually is in the military a provision of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's actually Article 134, if any of you are taking notes on that, that criminalizes a certain aspect of taking on too much debt. That's right, people have actually gone to a court-martial and been convicted of a crime relating to the debts that they have taken on. Now there's other forms of punishment that can be had for not managing one's finances well enough. Most of you may be familiar with the concept of non-judicial punishment, or punishment under Article 15, also part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And this is a form of punishment where a person doesn't go to a trial, but they can still have some pretty severe consequences handed down to them, such as losing some rank, or maybe it's a forfeiture of pay. Certainly in today's military, having any of this on your record is a career dampening, if not a career killing effect. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. People have been the subject, as I say, of court-martial prosecutions, of Article 15 non-judicial punishment, and ultimately you can be discharged based on this as well. It can even take the form of a punitive discharge in a court-martial, where you get the big chicken dinner, as they call it, the bad conduct discharge. And you certainly don't want that, because that sort of a discharge can have resonance through your life well beyond your time in the military. The important thing to understand about The failure to pay debts under Article 134 as it relates to military people, though, is that it's not a crime to go into debt or to take on a debt. We all pretty much do that. What criminalizes it is when an individual dishonorably fails to pay the debt. That's actually part of the elements of the crime. One of the things that you'll find is that when you look into any sort of criminal code, there are certain elements that a person has to meet before it becomes a crime. It's almost like a checklist of things to be considered. One of the very important things to be considered as it relates to debt is whether the failure to pay a debt is dishonorable. So if a person gets into a little bit of difficulty with their finances, it may not have to arise to the level of a crime or of a type of action even that the military will take action against you adversely upon if you act responsibly. If you get in over your head, there are many sorts of counseling services and different kinds of things available to you on a typical military installation. Every service branch has people who are designated to help you in one regard or a number. For example, in the Air Force, every squadron has a first sergeant that is there to help you with various difficulties and issues that you will encounter. That person can help direct you to the proper counseling services and other services that may be available to help you get through the problem. It's important to try and address these things early on, because once they get out of hand, it's more likely that somebody taking a look at this is going to say, well, I do think this situation has been a dishonorable failure to pay. So if you're struggling, it doesn't necessarily have to violate 134 as long as you are trying authentically to deal with it and doing that in a responsible way. And if you address it early enough and show the military authorities that you're being proactive about it, the likelihood is that you can get through it just fine. Now, in the event, though, that you do have a situation where it's gone past the pale, you're in a situation where the military authorities involved are looking at your situation pretty dimly, and maybe they're looking at some sort of charging related to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. In every service branch, there's a defense counsel service available where you can go and get legal advice to deal with your specific situation. Of course, I can't address specific situations on any particular issue today as it relates to debt. I'm simply trying to impart some general information that may be of use to you. But the defense counsel on a particular installation may be able to help guide you through that process.